So the first step to knowing what happens when you drink water and where that water goes is to know how much water there normally is in the body. So the average person is about 70 kilograms, which is 150 something pounds. And do you know what percentage of that weight is going to be water? Well, it turns out that we're about 60% water. So that means that if we want to know how much water would be in this body, we need to multiply by 0.6, which gives us 42 kilograms. And 1 liter of water weighs 1 kilogram. So this is equivalent to 42 liters of water. So that's how much water is in the average person. And now let's ask, where is that water normally in the average person? So it turns out that there's 2 different places where this fluid can be. It can either be inside cells, like for example your muscle cells that I'm drawing here, or potentially liver cells that I'm drawing here. It can either be in the cells or it can be around them. Cells are always bathing in water, and so that's another place where fluid can reside. So how is our 42 liters divided into these 2 different sections? Well, it turns out actually that most of it, actually about 2/3, is inside cells. So that makes up about 28 liters, and the rest is outside of cells. So that's 1/3 or 14 liters. Now the part that's inside cells we like to call the intracellular compartment, and the part that's outside cells we call the extracellular compartment. And the fact that we call them compartments suggests that they are somehow sealed off from one another. And they actually are, because around every cell there's a cell membrane. And so the intracellular compartment is separate from the extracellular compartment by a cell membrane. At the same time, it might seem weird to talk about one intracellular compartment because we have trillions of cells. And so really, you might think that we have trillions of little compartments. And that's technically true, but because the inside of all cells is very similar in terms of fluid and ions and solutes, we like to think of all those cells collectively as one compartment. Okay, so let's take stock of where we are. So we've talked a lot about filtration and what determines how much fluid and how many solutes are filtered. And we've also talked a lot about the mechanisms of reabsorption, especially the way we reabsorb sodium. And we mentioned that water tends to follow sodium, so really talking about how we reabsorb sodium is explaining how we reabsorb sodium and water. But what we haven't talked about is how the kidney changes the amounts of fluid and salt that it reabsorbs. And we know that that's important because the amount of salt and water that you eat and drink can change. On one day you might drink a lot of water and eat very little salt, and so on that day you would want to excrete more water and excrete less salt. And then on another day you might have a really salty meal but not drink much water, and so on that day you would want to do the opposite. So it's time for us to start thinking about how the kidney changes these processes, how it changes the amount of stuff that's filtered and reabsorbed. And in order to get into that, it's actually going to be important to first talk about exactly what happens when you do drink a lot of water. Where does that fluid go? Or when you do have a really salt-heavy meal, where does that salt go?